Welcome to Relationship Nation. I'm Wayne Martin, your host, and today we have Joshua Johnson, who's running for Reading City Council. So, Joshua, this is our third interview. What we really wanted to cover, or I wanted to cover, was budgets, the city budgets. I think there's a lot of confusion where the money flows, what's effective and what's not. So, you have a lot of information that you need to share with us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I have the benefit of being on city council right now as an appointed member since July. And this is one of the number one kind of issues I wanted to understand. So I meet with our CFO, Greg Robinette, who's also our treasurer. So he carries two hats at the city, an elected hat and an employee hat. And so when we meet, I enjoy getting into the details about how our numbers work. I would say I'm definitely not an expert yet, but of our council, I think that I am pretty quick understanding kind of where things are when Greg and I talk, and I really enjoy getting into the details. And really, our budget is made up of, in kind of like high level numbers. We kind of look at our budget at call it like 115% of the budget, and the reason is because CalPERS and our liability payments to retirees is that 15% that's above the 100%, and okay. we pay that no matter what. So that's our debt obligation for retirees. So then we're down to that 100% of our budget, the actual budget that. About 14% is our kind of community services, our roads and different things like that are kind of services above and beyond public safety, and about 85% is our public safety. That's our fire and police. So a big chunk of our budget is actually public safety, which is the number one job for government, in my opinion. Okay. You got public safety and infrastructure is actually what government is supposed to do really well, because you and I don't have paving machines, and we also, single-handedly can't catch all of the criminals and be detectives. Although we love watching the shows that tell us,
tell us we can.
Yes, yeah.
But that's not reality.
We'll all figure it out. No, yeah. So I'm grateful for that, and that allows us to have then, once public safety is in place, that quality of life types of services like our parks, our aquatic center, the Big League Dreams, which is now the Reading Sports Park, things like that, our rodeo grounds. Those are all important components of our community that falls under community services, parks and recreation. Right. And we as a city kind of judge our feeling and our sense of community based on how well we're doing with that, and so when we have to cut, we feel it first in those usually the community services side of things, that 14%, that discretionary part of our budget, and we like to do that before we hit our fire and police. Which
makes sense, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm a big dog park person here in Reading, and we go for a walk, the dog and I, practically every other day.
Yeah.
And our dog parks are great here.
Yeah, you go to the Benton one?
I
or
actually
which one do you go
to Nur Pond. It's a secret.
Cool. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I love it there. They've done great trails, and the dogs are safe. And
I love the pedestrian bridge there.
It's
beautiful.
2 pedestrian bridges.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's an island. But anyway, it's just great. You meet a lot of great people. Yeah. It's off leash, and so that's really wonderful.
Yep. And that's nearby the new Cancer Research Center, the Sierra Pacific Cancer Center that's going in there with Dignity Health.
Right.
So that's exciting that they are breaking
Very
ground.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Another great addition to our local area, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as far as budgets are concerned, money being spent on police and all the great work they do, thank God, they just really help everybody here.
Yep.
And so there was a time where we didn't have enough policemen. And how did that evolve?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is so ARPA funds came into the city during COVID.
And what is that?
Well, those were funds that were the federal government provided municipalities during the COVID crisis to help with deficits within the city government during the COVID crisis and how it was impacting each community. We got a number of those funds, and we decided to spend some of them on police. So our there are programs that we were able to kickstart that we've been wanting to do for a long time, and it helped us do that. There were also other grants that we went after that helped us, in the last 4 to 6 years that got our numbers up. So slowly and steadily, we have increased our numbers. We now have a motorcycle team that is downtown. We now have park rangers. We have CERT, which is Crisis Intervention Response Team. They work with mental health crisis, and they pair up with a mental health professional.
Let me ask you, let's go a little bit deeper on that. So the mental health seems to be a large component of helping with homeless, domestic violence, all that different stuff. So how's that working out?
Oh, it's working really well. We actually added a second team and increased that. Now we're looking and assessing, how big does that particular program need to be in our community? And that's definitely something that's being looked at. But crisis intervention was a huge component to take our patrol officers out of the position of having to be mental health professionals.
Right.
And to be trained in some of these and get kind of caught up, because calls for service come in, and if they're hung up on, a person who sees something in their attic every day, and is calling 911 and is suicidal, or has other people in the house or in the community that is in danger because of like an episode of some sort.
Sure.
Patrol officers, to have a crisis intervention or a trained officer, a peace officer paired up with a mental health professional has been extremely effective in those situations, but also with our encampments and trying to encourage people to get into services. They wear street clothes. Okay. These officers wear street clothes. They are still, they still have, all their tools that they need, a lot of the tools that they need to protect themselves and the community, but they come up and they're just much more approachable, and they're trained to just communicate and to connect at a human level. I've actually spent time with them out in the encampments at Nirpon before the cleanup.
Sure.
And all the work that was going into outreach there to build relationships. They set up a tent. They give out some food, basic snacks and water, and to try and get people into services. And if they want to accept services, they'll call the mission. The mission will come pick them up. They'll call Teen Challenge down in Anderson, and they'll come pick up somebody. They'll call. They've got partnerships with every one of these social services that work with CERT, and they have them on speed dial. Right. And I think that's really critical. Is that it's a partnership. It's not just enforcement. It's also a partnership with what I kind of call the heart of our community, which is our social service community. A lot of the nonprofits. So I think that program is incredibly effective, and I'm grateful because I met a lot of the patrol officers. I mean, it's really hard to do what you need to do to enforce the laws, and then be caught up for hours on end with a case that kind of goes above and beyond that basic training. Sure. We those officers need to be able to respond to other types of incidents that we as a community need them to be either proactive in, or to be be able to respond in a reasonable amount of time. And I think this team is enabled that, because the SHASCOM will they'll just, our 911, they'll just divert those calls and send out CERT to particular types of calls for service that won't even take a patrol officer off beat.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. So, I've heard a lot of criticism over the years that, things are not really moving in the right direction with the homeless and the mental health things. And it seems like now, I've noticed in the last few years, it's really gotten better.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's calmer. Different patrol people that I've talked to, police, they've just said, it's nice not to have to fill out all these crazy reports, and we're not trained for it, like you said.
Yeah, I do think in that hand, like from an effectiveness, if you look at an officer as like a tool in the toolbox for being able to enforce our laws, you want the wrench to do the wrench thing, you want the screwdriver to do the screwdriver, you need a drill for a drill thing, and you need a hammer for hammer things, and it's just being able to get to be able to partition our police. And I was in the Citizen Police Academy, and I got to spend about 36 hours kind of diving deep into each of these departments. And it is absolutely incredible to see the depth of knowledge that our detectives have and the training that they get as detectives. And then, what our, SWAT team is a whole nother team. And a lot of that's a volunteer team above and beyond. They're already officers in other teams, right? Doing other jobs. Okay. And they're also on SWAT.
Wow.
So they're not full-time SWAT. SWAT doesn't get called out all the time, but they get called out. And when they do, the SWAT team then coalesces and they get the Bearcat and they'll go and do the SWAT team stuff. It's just incredible how, and then the cross-training that happens. If you really want to kind of move up inside a department, you want to be, getting opportunities to move to different teams to get more training.
Sure.
And a lot of our officers, I love the ambition that we have within our department, because a lot of our officers, they want to get that cross training to move to different teams. And I think that's so critical for our community. And so, yeah, I do think it's getting better, but I do also want to raise the flag that is necessary right now too, is that I do think that we're seeing an increase of mental health related crime, and it's getting more and more violent. Even at the Mission or Hill Country could attest to this, and some other social service organizations. We're seeing more incidents, violent incidents at these organizations that are trying to provide these services. And without mental health facility, without mental health dollars from the state, which is our taxpayer dollars to deal with this, we are going to continue to see that be an issue. And CERT on their own is not going to be able to solve that problem for us, right?
Right.
Like they can approach someone and they can contact someone and they can try and get them into services, or you got 5150s, which getting partnered with Shasta Regional Health Center and things like. But they also aren't set up to hold someone long term and to actually care for them as a mental health facility. That's not actually how they're.
So let me ask you this then. So as city councilman, how effective can you be?
Well, we have to go. I do think that we need to look at the dollars that are coming into the county and cities for opioid settlement dollars. So I'm going to get the exact number on what's coming into the city for that, but I heard it's in the range of potentially $7 million. The county's going to get somewhere around $30 million or so. The first round of Prop 1 funding is around 50 some million for 5-county area up here in the North State. That's a start, right? And so what we do with that, please keep an eye on that. I would say no matter who's in office, keep an eye on and stay in touch with that, because if we want to see a real change in the needle move, what we do with those dollars could have a huge impact on the rest of the community. Prop 36 also will have a huge impact, because we'll be able to kind of reform some of the problems that Prop 47 had.
Oh, okay. So Prop 36, a little explanation on that.
I know we're jumping around a little bit, but it all ties
I think it's
together.
Important.
Yeah,
I think it's super important.
Yeah.
that the audience understands what the stuff is, because what 36, this, that.
Yeah,
But
36 is in the ballot, so please read your guide, the election ballot guide, because. But what's important about that is one of the most effective tools. If you talk to people that are at addiction recovery programs, which I work around a bit, and almost all the stories are like, if the court had not gave me the option of going to prison or a rehab program,
right,
my life would not be where it is today. And I'm talking about one of the guys is, one of the top selling real estate agents in our town.
Right.
volume wise.
Right.
Incredible guy.
Right.
And that's just one of many stories that I've heard. And if you go to these graduation ceremonies of the men and women that are graduating from addiction recovery, they all say, I was facing years for what I was doing, and my life is now changed because I got into this program, and a judge gave me the option.
The option.
And if we don't have that, with Prop 36 allows judges to make that an option again. We kind of lost some of that for a while, and we need that, the carrot and the stick. And
Sure.
for those individuals that it seems like it looks like you really want to change, looks like you really want to take this seriously. I think that's something we need in our community again.
So within that, there's milestones that those people have to meet as they go through recovery.
And if they actually recover and they meet those milestones, their record can be expunged.
Wow.
Right? And they can get their life back, and they can do different things, because really a lot of the crime was induced by the addiction to the drugs, right?
Yes. Well, the other thing too is some of the homeless people that I've seen.
And we're not. I just want to say we're not talking about violent,
right? No, that's
violence
different.
Against people, right?
Right.
So,
no, we're just talking about addiction, right?
Yeah, and you could say theft, and you can say, let's say
Minor,
whatever,
petty
yes,
stuff.
Still felonious. It could be felonious,
Sure.
but not harmful against a human. I mean, there's different kind of degrees of this.
Yeah. Well, let's keep moving on some of the budget stuff.
Going back to budgets.
Yeah, and then I don't know. You want to segue into economic incentive policy?
Well, let's talk about, before we go there, I would say let's talk about why I think an economic incentive policy matters. We're facing a budget deficit at the city. We have a tool that the city has. It's a 10-year budgeting tool that we use, so we can forecast our CalPERS payments and all of our liabilities out over a 10-year period. We can forecast increases in inflation and costs of doing business and projects.
Right.
We have a lot of improvement projects, right? Public works improvement projects.
Almost like a regular business.
Yes. And we can forecast those increases. We can forecast our salaries and employees. We can forecast, our police and fire all the way out. And we also can forecast our revenues, which is sales tax, property tax, permits and fees, different things like that. We are seeing a drop in sales tax right now. There's a contraction in our economy, regardless of what the federal government wants to tell us. People aren't spending the way they were spending a few years back.
Right.
And that has an impact because somewhere around $30 million a year of our budget comes from sales tax.
Okay.
And so we have a drop of like 1.8, 1.5, 1.8. I don't have the numbers like right off my head, but it's somewhere around there of sales tax. Thankfully, property tax has gone up, and we've talked about that a little bit.
Yeah,
property tax has helped save our bacon a little bit in this year. But looking out ahead, when we say that there's a budget deficit, we're saying that if we make no changes, if we spend based on what's on the plan and we make no changes, this is where we're going. Now, what is a deficit at the city level? Well, that doesn't mean that we're going into debt. We have reserves. Council policy right now is to maintain 10% reserves. We were able to save more than 10% for a few years, but before 2018 or so, our reserve policy was 5%. It's a council policy. It was 5%. We increased it to 10% to be more conservative. So we have a 10% reserve policy. Well, if we make no changes, we will dip below that reserve policy and start pulling from reserves to cover. Well, obviously, that has an end in sight that's not good. So if we make no changes and we fall asleep at the wheel, which no one's doing, right? Greg Robinette's really smart. Our city manager is really smart. Our council hopefully is waking up to this. We all are looking at this now. It's something that's very, very important, and I hope the next council does too, is we will have to make changes, and every department is looking at it. So one of the things that's really encouraging is that we have a 10-year budget tool. I don't think the county has that yet. So I would hope that they would start to do that soon. because it allows you to get out ahead without having to react at a year-by-year basis or 2-year basis
Right.
or whatever. You can actually see things at a much longer scale. So it's just a tool. Obviously, it's like we call it cone of uncertainty. Here is this year, and the farther away it gets, the more uncertain it gets.
Right.
It's
Well, and we never know. Do we have a black swan? That could hit the city somehow,
Right.
like the fires were a black swan event.
Yeah, the fires were a black swan event. One of the things that's like the dark side of fires is that we have increased TOT when we have a big fire season. So we see TOT drop when we have no fires.
No fires.
Yeah,
Right.
So it's a weird thing. So sometimes then there's FEMA money that comes into the city when there's fires and disasters of it.
Right.
We don't want disasters as a community. No. So that is not a revenue source that we want to go after. Lord, help give us, these disasters. Like, no, no one's doing that.
Yeah.
We want our community to stay safe. So I think, if all things being equal and we have a normal year like we did this year, pretty minimal fires, and we have some economic contraction and just tightening, we have to make some changes. Another tool we have besides the 10-year budgeting tool is we start with zero-based budgeting. So what that means is that we ask every department director. So if you're a public works director, we say, hey, start from zero and justify every expenditure, include every employee. Every expenditure has to be justified.
Right.
And then it's going to go. Your budget then is going to go, and then our city manager instructed our directors to find cuts this year. So start from zero and find cuts. That's been the directive because we see what's coming.
Right.
So then it goes to every director sends their budget to an accountant who's a liaison in our finance department. That accountant goes over it and sends it back, and they go back and forth. And then after it's been approved by their liaison in the finance department, it goes to Greg Robinette. And then and after Greg Robinette, it goes to our city manager, Barry Tippin, and it gets approved 3 times, right?
Okay.
Before it goes to council for a budget approval.
Okay.
So that's how that budget works. I appreciate that process because we have real true numbers of our true costs because we start from zero. We don't just say, take last year's budget and add 5%.
Right.
A lot of cities do that.
Right.
That's I think it's more helpful to know where you truly are. But that means when you are looking at cuts, you have already a true number. You're not going to find a lot of money under the cushions,
right?
Because you started from zero,
right?
So
in my world, I would call it value budgeting.
Sure.
You have to justify the value of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to pare it down.
Yeah. So cuts are one way that we can approach a budget deficit, but also going on the revenue side and saying, well, how do we increase the revenue in the city, which is sales tax and property tax? And when people say, well, why would you want to give government more revenue? No. So listen, you remember that 14% that's community services? All the parks that you want, the roads and the potholes you want to be filled come from property tax and sales tax. So if those go up and increase the revenue for the city, that's where that money's going.
Well, we're in a deficit on working on the streets, right? Mm-hmm. By how much per year? How much do we keep pushing off the problem?
We probably are deferring maintenance of around $7 million a year that we really need for our roads.
So the other thing with the roads, it's a compounding expense. So if you can jump in, I have a development background like you. So say the roads has a certain age, you can seal it, you can do a lot of things. The farther it goes, the worse it gets expense-wise too, because then if you lose a subbase, you have to dig it up. Then you have to do all these things. And so, by not having the revenue to be able to deal with that, it's dangerous for a city, I would think, economically.
Yeah, and a lot of our roads now, when we're doing maintenance, we're not doing just top coating and then trimming the gutters down and then tying it back in where you got these huge crowns and streets. Right. We don't want that anymore. So our baseline is going down 2-3 inches across the board so that when we're doing a new coat, it's the even and equal. which means that you're going to have a lot less patchwork. But when we do road repairs, it's going to be more longer lasting.
Right.
I like that strategy. I know that it's going to mean some people are going to hate some of the roads, but if we did just that minimal model, duct tape model, after a while your whole city's duct tape and you have no money for real good improvements.
Right.
So we have 60 square miles. It is a lot. And so, but going back to the revenue side, the economic incentive policy is a council policy that hasn't been overhauled in 30 years. What I would like to see our council do is, and I'm willing to spearhead this. I'm already been meeting with our EDC, meeting with our city manager, our assistant city manager, the Reading Chamber, and gathering some info to update this policy. I think it can be done by early spring. That will directly tie incentives to sales tax and property tax, which would directly trickle down to our community where we can feel the benefits of it.
Okay.
So if we're going to incentivize, let's say, a business to come into our town, and light industrial fulfillment, distribution, or we're going to incentivize a business to grow within our town, someone who's already here, I want those incentives to be tied to the money spent within the city, which benefits our sales tax, and the property value that they are improving. So we can directly tie it to those things and see the direct benefit to our community for years to come, right?
Right.
Sales tax is a one-time thing when you're doing a project, but property tax is something we get every year. And remember, on sales tax, we only get 13% ish of the 7.25% that we pay for property or sales tax.
Okay, yeah, that's a small number.
Yes, a very small number. And on property tax, we get between 12 and 20% for the property tax within within the city of Reading. So for your house in the city of Reading, the city gets about 15 to 20% or so, 12 to 20% of that property tax comes back to the city. So the other parts go to the state. Where you got schools, you got the county, and it gets distributed. And we're kind of a centralized tax system here in California, and other states do it pretty differently.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, great.
Yeah.
Great. So we've got another 5 minutes to talk about things. Do you want to talk about the airport, or have we talked about the economic incentive policy?
Yeah. So the airport's a great conversation to have. I think that there's been a lot of discussion at the county board of supervisors is really interested, and I think what elevated is losing Avelo they went out to the East Coast and I think it just raised everyone's thinking like, okay, like what's wrong with the airport? And I think, we could come back and when we have more time and maybe talk kind of deeper about that. I've actually dug into that,
on
the
our
research.
Next episode.
Sure. Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about why was Arcata or Santa Rosa able to keep, what's different with those airports from our airport from a funding standpoint.
Right.
And how does Reading compete in the type of category of airport that we are, and also what's on the horizon.
Right.
Like we heard a Denver flight, the Denver flight's coming. We also have, it looks like some other airlines that we're courting. And so I think things are moving in a great direction. But one thing I'll say about Avelo is that it was a startup airline that approached us to move here.
Okay.
They provided great service for us. We would have loved to have kept them. But it was, their decision. We didn't do revenue guarantee with them. They decided to come here. They have very big planes too. So our market does really well with those mid-sized planes. We can fill them very frequently, and we have great flights to LAX. We have great flights to San Francisco, and Seattle is doing well. So I think we're starting to see like what's our perfect ideal model. But if another airline started up and they said, "Hey, Reading, we'd like to try you out," we'd be like, "Why not?
Yeah,
you're going to provide great service to our community. Go ahead," and we work out an arrangement. But that's kind of what happened with Avelo. But I can go deeper into why other communities and other airports are different than ours. And I'm just really proud that we have an airport. That's called the Reading Regional Airport. I'm grateful that the FAA improvements are going to be done next year. And we want to get more flights. It's a small budget item. It's like $3.5 million on our budget.
Okay.
But a huge economic impact to our community.
Well, great. We'll dive into that in our next episode. And thanks for stopping by. And
Yeah.
So get out there and vote.
Yeah.
And make a difference in our community.
Yeah.
And
Thank you very much.
participate. Thank you.
Yeah.